What can managers do to make sure that everyone has an equal shot at access to leadership?
Well, it takes consciousness, first and foremost, for any leader, any institution to understand that people come into their entity with differing beliefs, with different cultural norms, with differing sensibilities about roles to be played. And so a manager in a diverse organization needs to actually develop further tools because the diversity itself isn't going to do it. If you have someone who is quiet, who has been taught to not speak out, then unless the manager understands that that's not because the person is stupid and doesn't have any ideas, but to understand that, no, they were brought up with grandma teaching them to not speak up because that's their cultural norms, that therefore I, manager, have the responsibility to invite that person to speak. Now, the person who has been taught to not speak up also has a responsibility to get a little out of that cultural comfort zone and to speak up a little more. So it takes both the manager and the individual to ensure that you actually are both getting the value of the diversity and moving towards that true meritocracy.
Do you think most organizations have a meritocracy in place?
All of the evidence shows that there is not a meritocracy in organizations. I think part of the challenges, particularly around gender, is that dominant groups will very quickly and very readily move to the explanation that women have outside childcare or those kinds of things. They'll move to the work-life issues. And I'm not saying that those issues aren't important, because they are. But then you have to ask yourself, well, what happened to the Japanese men who came into the organization? What happened to the men of African descent who came into the organization? They came in to the organization. Where did they go? Because they didn't make it to the top either. Right? So that tells you that there are a lot of other institutional structural deviations that are going on. So I sometimes worry that focusing too much on work-life issues, it isn't to say you shouldn't have programs for that. You shouldn't have returnship programs. You shouldn't have part-time flexibility. It's not that you shouldn't have that kind of things. You must have them. However, that's not going to get you to the answer of what you're really looking for in terms of getting a true meritocracy in an organization.
If you had one thing that you could say to organizations to help them do better when it comes to diversity, what would that be?
First and foremost, I would say understand that just getting to diversity, you're not even halfway there. You really have to think more in terms of inclusive frameworks. You have to learn that the dominant group needs to understand it needs to change. Look at the only silver bullet that I have ever seen that actually works, and there's lots of controversy around it, of course, is the quota, or some sort of affirmative mechanism that creates a penalty or a positive that will actually change behaviors quickly. Because people change for 3 reasons, and 3 reasons only: pain, gain, or leadership. Implementing things that create huge amount of pain if you don't do them, or huge amount of gain if you do them, or the rarer, which is the leader who can create that kind of change in the follower.
What attributes make the strongest leaders, and how does diversity fit into that?
The most important notion is to understand that everyone has these leadership traits. So they're not gendered in that sense. But if you actually say, well, who have we turned to for leadership? What are our archetypes of what a leader looks like? They have a tendency to be gendered, and they have a tendency to be male, because male are supposed to be active and engaged and assertive in what they do. But the truth of the matter is the best leaders have the skill sets that have historically come from men and have the skill sets that historically come from women. So they have the broadest range of tools in their toolbox, because sometimes it takes direct command and control to do something. And sometimes it takes more relational, inclusive skills to do something. But in truth, the best leaders will have learned both sets of skills.